BBC Sounds, music, radio, podcast.
Hello, my guest on This Classical Life today is the pianist and composer Zubin Kanga. We'll be getting to know Zubin over the next half an hour, and Zubin and I will be sharing some of our favourite music. So coming up, there's orchestral music by Rachmaninoff and Ravel, a classic recording of piano music by Chopin, electronic sounds from Laurie Spiegel, and much more. You'll find all the music details on BBC Sounds. Just search for This Classical Life. Zubin Kanga is based in London but grew up and studied in Sydney, Australia. As a performer of new music, he's a fearless advocate of the unknown. He's given over 130 world premieres. Zubin's latest album is called Machine Dreams. He's the director and principal investigator of a group called the Cyborg Soloists, and he teaches digital arts at Royal Holloway University. So I was really interested to know how Zubin describes himself and what he does.
So I'm a pianist, a composer and technologist. And for the last 10 years, I've been focusing on doing contemporary music with new technologies. So extending the piano, extending my body with different kinds of sensors, with audiovisual interaction, new digital instruments, AI, machine learning.
That sounds so fascinating. New digital instruments. What's your favourite new digital instrument been?
Well, I've been using these Mimu gloves. They're kind of gloves which have sensors in the fingers as well as in the wrist, so motion sensors in the wrist. So you can use gestures with your hands to create different sounds. So I can actually be playing the piano and then move my hands through the air and shape it and do things and capture one sound and turn it one way or the other.
Wow. Kind of like magic.
Yeah, it's very sci-fi. It's great.
It sounds a bit like a theremin, but kind of without all of the...
Yeah, it's very similar. A lot of the gestures are very similar to a theremin, and that you are sort of conducting through the air.
That's really cool. And what was your first interaction with sound? Can you remember?
I remember sort of vaguely dancing around. Sort of my parents had a large living room. They'd sort of designed the house to mimic the house my father grew up with in India, which had a large living area where you could have a large family gathering. So I remember on that floor space sort of dancing around to different pieces. I think Ravel's Bolero was one of those pieces. So this is like probably, when I'm probably a toddler or barely older. And then I started playing the piano quite young. I was 5 years old.
And what else was playing in the house other than classical music?
My dad was into a lot of, I guess, 60s and 70s sort of popular music that he grew up with, from the Beatles to the Who. That kind of music was definitely in the house, and it's, some folk music from that period.
Well, shall we get started with having a listen to some music?
Yes.
So the first choice today, Zubin, is your choice. Where are we starting today?
So we're starting with Gesualdo. These are the Tenebrae responsories. And this is a piece I heard the entire set of these done over 3 successive Easters in Sydney by the Song Company. And they'd done these pieces with a team of dancers, and all the dancers were recreating scenes from the Passion, almost like scenes that resembled Caravaggio paintings. And it sort of really worked well with this music, which is so strange in the way it deals with harmony, all these strange chromaticisms that go in directions that you don't really expect. And just worked well with all these, bodies on stage doing all sorts of wonderful contortions.
There's also something comforting and beautiful about it. I think often when there's a collection of voices, that can be the case, that you kind of feel a comfort in these different things weaving in and out. You can follow different lines. It's not peaceful, but there's something soothing in the changing and all of the tension, because there's constantly a release.
there's so many other composers around this time who are playing with harmony like this in totally different ways.
Does that sense of exploration, because things were at the beginning, because things were being set out, does that inspire you now for looking at new ways of doing things that have then found the rules?
Yeah, they were really exploring and exactly how to establish harmony and how, but also playing with how to destabilize it constantly. Like as soon as they set up a set of rules, they would constantly be playing with those rules. My professor in Sydney, her name was Professor Winsome Evans, and she was like the grandmother of early music in Australia. She's taught everyone, and she was, you know, almost like a character from this period. All her work was done in calligraphy. All your assignments had to be submitted in calligraphy, your musical assignments, which was a bit eccentric and probably wouldn't pass muster now. But it was amazing to be immersed in that world, and she was also very supportive of contemporary music.
I love that. Submitted in calligraphy.
Yeah.
I might try that.
Because it does make your brain do different things.
Well, this next choice is mine and is a totally different world. This is the last movement of Symphonic Dances by Rachmaninoff. And this is one of my favourite pieces because as a saxophone player you don't get to sit in the orchestra very often.
It has a big sax part. Yeah.
It does, but it's at one point only. So it plays its beautiful solo in the wind section and then doesn't play again for the whole piece.
Oh, no.
I've never actually done it, but I'd love to do it because you then just get to sit inside the orchestra and listen to the whole rest of the piece. The first two movements of this piece are so, I think, clear in their atmosphere, in their emotion. You can you hear the theme, you follow what happens to the theme, there's a line of drama. And here in the third movement, suddenly it feels like everything kind of falls away and there's this kind of mystery and haze, and it takes lots of time for everything to reveal what it is. And it was Rachmaninoff's last piece, so you can't help but wonder, is it a kind of reflection on life? Is it heading towards the end? And he references lots of his other pieces and old works.
And because by this time he was he'd been in the United States for some time, I think. Because I do hear like bits of sort of, Russian things that maybe have a bigger role in his early music. But then actually this style of music is, so influential on, a lot of then American music that comes after that, a lot of American film music, he's so influential on, so he kind of does become a real international composer.
And it was supposed to be a ballet, but it was deemed undanceable. I don't know, I think in the first two movements you can definitely feel the element of dance, but here
no.
It'd be, I don't know what kind of dance.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel like it's written for dance. It feels like it's really written as being a wonderful showcase for the orchestra. Sometimes people over-egg some of his music. Definitely not in this performance. I think this is really beautifully done. But then it's the Berlin Philharmonic, so that's why it's amazing playing.
Well, this next choice is yours, Zubin. Where are we? What's the music? What's the piece?
So this is a composer called Laurie Spiegel, who's an American composer who's been a real innovator in electronic music for decades. I guess there's been a lot of people going back and realizing that there are a lot of amazing women who've been pioneers in electronic music. So, Daphne Oram, Wendy Carlos, Delia Derbyshire. So this is using analog synthesizers. So in a way, it's old technology compared to the sort of new digital things I'm working with now. But I still think there's something very special about the sound of these instruments. You know, sounds that you just never heard of before. And just by playing around and twisting knobs, you can just explore this world of creating new sounds.
And I know it sounds like a slightly obvious thing to say, but this was released only 4 years after the Jaco Pastorius album. He was pushing boundaries. He was looking at new ways the bass could work. Here, boundaries are being pushed with what music and sound can be and how synthesizers can be used. And within 4 years to have such different sounds happening, it shows how diverse we are as a people.
Yeah, different people, but there's a connection in that there's synthesizers were being explored, you know, by a lot of those jazz players as well. Miles Davis, you know, sort of electrified his band. He brought, you know, electric bass synthesizers and all that into his band. So it was definitely this idea of what can we do as musicians with this new technology at the time, and this before computers, but still like so for me, like looking back, it's like I always think about like how futuristic it must have felt just to be able to discover that you could make sound out of these objects just by, you know, plugging in little cables and things. It's sort of quite, you know, must have been quite magical.
And I love the album cover. The album
very
cover
colourful.
Yeah, and it's kind of just like an interview with her, and I was reading some of the lines on it, and she's asked to describe her music, and she talks about how that's kind of impossible. She says, music isn't verbal or conceptual. I try to get as close as I can to certain qualities, and I found these in a variety of styles. I've also found they don't require any known styles. So you can find all the things that you want in these different, you don't have to already know it.
Yeah, and you can come to that sort of music from a lot of different backgrounds and find something to enjoy in it.
I love exploring new and old sounds here on This Classical Life. You're listening to BBC Radio 3 with me, Jess Gillam, and my guest today is the pianist and composer Zubin Kanga. You can find all the details of the music we're playing on BBC Sounds. Well, this next piece is my choice, and this is an arrangement of Clair de Lune by Debussy by Carolina Eick, and it's for voice and theremin. I imagine Clair de Lune is probably a piece that you are very familiar with playing, maybe.
I've never played in public, but I have, you know, I've played a lot of Debussy, and I played this piece for myself. Yeah, so I love Debussy. I find him he's so revolutionary in such a sort of quiet and sort of sensuous way. This piece is, you know, case in point. You know, it's now used in like lots of movies, and it's, you know, seen as, you know, being this kind of romantic piece. But actually, it's very strange and very unusual in how the melody moves, how the harmony's kind of placed. It's kind of, even the opening is sort of somehow quite stark, and you don't even quite know exactly, you know, where it's going to go and where you're placed harmonically.
Yeah, right from the very opening note, you're kind of left in this, I guess, again, quite a hazy, surreal atmosphere, but then all these kind of like the little small descents, the little rises up. When it's on the piano, it's quite fluid, quite watery. Oh, yeah. But here, when you hear it on synths, theremin and voice, it becomes this completely different atmosphere. It's now this kind of surreal in a different kind of way, and my ear is never sure whether I'm listening to the theremin or the voice. There's all this interaction.
Yeah, it allows you to hear different parts of the music, and it's also just a wonderfully like strange and like futuristic kind of arrangement.
I think it makes you think about where the music lies, because we will never hear Clair de Lune played on the piano that Debussy wrote it at. So hearing kind of new interpretations of old things. It's not that they're more relevant to the now, just that they're kind of the best way that we think we can interpret what's in this black and white code on the page to an audience of today.
Yeah, and all these works of the canon are sort of living things that need to be reinterpreted and re-examined all the time. That's what actually keeps them alive.
Well, speaking of new ways of exploring old things, this is a piece by Zimmerman, music for King Upu's dinners. And this is the last movement, which is actually quite terrifying. So as we've heard, we have three main musical ideas. There's the timpani line from March to the Scaffold by Berlioz from Symphonie Fantastique, and then Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries, and then a piece by Stockhausen, Klavierstück No. 4, those kind of repeating piano chords. And hearing the three together feels like you're in some kind of crazy hall of mirrors, maybe fantastical, beautiful thing, but I heard it and was quite unsettled. What did you make of it?
It's a very interesting approach to sort of overlaying and using bits of the musical past. And there's now actually like quite a tradition of composers doing this, being, I guess, in a crude way you'd say just postmodern, but actually they're doing very different things. And what Zimmerman is doing is playing with all these different references in quite a playful way. Like you said, like a fairground or quite disorientating. It's kind of yeah, I'm just laughing at the Berlioz there.
Do you think it is a kind of fun look at it, or do you think it's slightly taking the mickey that these are the things that have become very popular?
I guess it's playing with the idea of what a dramatic piece should be, maybe, or what it, this kind of history of this very dramatic and violent music. It's hard to tell because it is also slightly disturbing as well. The way the Stockhausen chords there are kind of really
quite relentless.
I did a piece recently using AI, and I sort of fed a whole lot of pieces I'd done from the canon into it, and then the AI spat out a whole lot of things which sounded like piano music, which were kind of all mixed together, bits of like piano sounds from Debussy and Ravel and Messiaen.
Yeah, I was trying my hardest to hold on to what you were saying about AI, Zubin, but the piece was absolutely destroying me. It's so confusing.
It's so crazy. It's really storytelling. It's like that was it's a really it's a wild piece. But yeah, thank you for choosing that.
Well, let's have something a little bit more familiar to recenter ourselves. This next choice is yours. What do we have now?
So we have Chopin's Barcarolle, Opus 60. And this is a performance by Dinu Lipatti. He died relatively young of Hodgkin's disease, and so didn't leave behind many recordings. I guess also because he died in 1950, when recordings was slightly more rare. But everything he recorded is a classic of that piece. I love Chopin. I think Chopin has an approach to the piano where he combines a sort of knowledge of the body and biomechanics with a knowledge of the sound of the instrument, and it's all completely in sync, exactly how you use your body and how you use the instrument. And maybe for Chopin it came because he was quite sickly, so he actually couldn't just use pure muscular power. He had to sort of find really efficient ways of using his body on the piano.
And when you say using the body and understanding biomechanics, do you mean physically navigating the piano and then how he writes for the hands on the piano?
Yeah, he kind of found a very efficient way of moving around the pianos. And I guess this is a core part of a lot of piano teaching now, but I think Chopin reached a sort of particular height of this where, just the way you move around the piano, the way you move your wrists, he knows that when he wants something to sound slightly different, he makes the wrist, stretch slightly differently.
The title, the Barcarolle, the word comes from a boatman or gondolier, and you kind of often think of it as maybe like a gently rocking, maybe a trip along a canal or something, quite still. This isn't, is it?
No, it's like a lot of Chopin, there's sort of this genre piece underneath it, like, there's a kind of Venetian kind of, gondola song, but it starts there, but then it goes in all these different, like, dramatic directions, just like his polonaises. They're not really danceable. They sort of go in so many different directions. The mazurkas as well, they're so sophisticated. So I think he liked doing that. He liked having this kind of facade of this sort of genre, but actually what it's doing is so like much more revolutionary than it seems on the surface.
Well, to close the programme today, we have a piece by Ravel. This is the last movement of the Mother Goose, and this is the Fairy Garden or the Enchanted Garden.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear the orchestral arrangement. This is a piece I've done on the two-piano original, and Ravel is one of those composers where there's no bad work in his output. Every work is amazing. And this is quite, so understated and simple, but there's so much happening here.
So I was playing a concert recently, and this was, I think it was either first in the concert or it was in the second half, and I was listening to the rehearsal, watching the rehearsal, and kind of fell in love with the music, but this movement in particular, it's the kind of, I suppose, the golden thread that manages to draw your ear in, pull on it, and then release it. I didn't know it was called The Enchanted Garden. I didn't know the narrative at all of the piece, but then you read about it and Ravel writes, this is dawn, birds are singing, Prince Charming enters, led by a cupid. He notices the sleeping princess. She awakens at the same time that day is breaking. And you read that and you think, oh, of course, that sounds like the bird, that sounds like a royalty might sound, or kind of sleeping, but there's a lot of love in it. There's a lot of tenderness and beauty.
Yeah, so clear. And as you said, like that golden thread of this endless melody going through this as well.
It doesn't stop.
It doesn't stop, and it's going between the instruments. I mean, he's such a master orchestrator as well. It's really about the melody going through the whole piece.
What a bed of sound there.
Yeah.
Well, Zubin, thank you so much for sharing all of your choices and thoughts today. We've been on quite a journey, actually.
Yes, it's across genre, across time. Thanks very much for having me. It's been really great to chat, and and wonderful to discover all your choices as well.
and thank you for listening and discovering the music with us. I'm Jess Gillam and I'll be back with another guest next week, but for now, why not check out any episodes of the show you might have missed? Just search for This Classical Life on BBC Sounds.